Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining this live session today. I'm joined by two thought leaders and data experts, Andy Hanna and Jack Phillips. So this session today, we'll be talking about strategic data quality, frameworks for executive decision-making and investment in data. Thank you both for joining for this live session today and lending your time. I'm Kate Gallo. I'm the head of marketing here at Blue Street Data. I'll be your moderator today. Throughout the session, you can ask live questions in the Q&A function at the bottom or chat. All three of us will see the questions that come in, and I'll field them to Andy and Jack. So as we're talking, if any pop-up questions come up, feel free to ask them throughout the whole session, and we'll get to them at the end. I'm going to hand it off to Jack Phillips and then Andy to give some short introductions, and then we'll get started with some questions.
Great, Kate. Thanks. Hello, everybody. I'm Jack Phillips. I'm the CEO and founder of the International Institute for Analytics, or IIA. We're about a 13-year-old benchmarking and research firm focused exclusively in the world of data analytics and now increasingly AI. So we support large enterprises in their journeys to become data-driven and now AI-driven.
Thanks, Jack. Hi, everybody. I'm Andy Hanna. I'm CEO of Blue Street Data. And Blue Street Data is focused on bringing transparency to the buying and selling of data. So we help organizations understand provenance, quality, and price related to data so you can integrate that data quicker and make sure that it matches your use cases. Just as a quick aside, Jack and I got our start in the data world back about 30 years ago, where we were mining data out of the former Soviet Union and bringing that to companies who wanted to do business or invest in those regions. So we've been in the data business for a long time, huh, Jack?
That is true. I don't know that we knew we were in the data business back then, but it takes 30 years to recognize that we were, and we were pioneers in that space. And you're exactly right.
That's great. I'm sure you guys have many good stories from that era of things. It's great to have two data veterans with us today who have a lot of experience. So to kick things off, I want to start broad with some of these questions, and then we'll get more narrow with frameworks and a lot of both your expertise here. So to start off, I'm going to pose this question to Jack and then Andy, but this is for both of you. What are you both seeing in how data leaders and teams, companies are adapting to the quickly changing world of analytics, data, and AI? What's going well? What could use some improvement, and what's a continued struggle?
Kate, it's a central question for all of our research clients today who have really cast themselves as data and analytics leaders and who now have this sort of exogenous force coming at them, which we're calling AI. And there's a lot of what we call AI theater out there today. What are we really speaking about? What are we really talking about when we use that word AI? Is this a whole new category, or is this a subset of what we've been doing for decades? And our answer is it's the latter. It's a subset. That there are some really fantastic generative tools today that are making folks more efficient. But that is not to be confused with what I might call capital AI, the world hunger concept that AI can solve all things at large enterprises. So the leaders that you mentioned are being challenged to incorporate correctly, I think, this AI trend. And again, a lot of the hype and overhang and overinvestment that's taking place. And I think they're doing it successfully. And in some places, boards and CEOs decide this is a new thing. Most of the high performers that we see are incorporating it into the infrastructure that exists today.
I would echo that, Jack. I think what I like to see is that AI is causing, senior leadership to reimagine the business a bit. So I think back about, even when the internet was emerging and big data then emerged, and we learned how to capitalize off of statistical modeling plus that big data to give us analytics, like you preach, Jack. But now, with AI, we're reimagining. So what can we do differently about the business? How does generative AI help us from a productivity standpoint, from a creative standpoint? but along with that comes the risks. And I think that's probably where I get concerned the most about is the framework to understand the risk around the implementation of generative AI and the related data is something that we need to really focus on.
Yeah, that's great. And Jack, I want to build off of some of what you were saying with what the IIA does in terms of, assessing a company's analytic maturity. What are you seeing as some of the most common misconceptions organizations or companies have about their own analytics maturity?
Overconfidence. Overconfidence. It's a simple answer. So when we engage with an enterprise and begin to talk about what it means to measure maturity, not only maturity today, but what they anticipate that maturity to become in the future, there is without question an expectation that I'll use on a 1 to 5 scale. Well, we expect that we'll come in at a 3.5 to a 4, when in fact, actually, after a real thorough analysis is done and surveys are completed and numbers are crunched, their maturity is actually quite a bit lower than that. So I think that's the number one thing. That then causes some good things to happen, however, right? A sort of a reckoning, if you will, internally, to Andy's point a minute ago, that if we're going to prepare for this new era, if we tie these two together, ultimately, Stephen Skleru had a great post yesterday that basically said, hey, we've got the models right. We're just not feeding it the right stuff. We're just not feeding those models correctly. It comes back to the D of the Delta Plus model that we have. That's data, right? And so I think there is a reckoning now and an understanding at senior levels. Oh, you guys have been preaching about the quality of our data for a long time. Now we get it. Now we get it.
Gotcha. Yeah. And speaking of data, Andy, I want to pass this off to you. What are some of the most common risks you see organizations are overlooking when it comes to data quality, E being the foundational data in that Delta model that Jack just talked about?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is the focus on the Q word. I mean, quality is incredibly important, but you can't separate that quality from provenance. So we need to understand, or people need to understand, that the source of that data, the ethical acquisition of that data, the ability to use it across the organization, the frequency of updates, all this provenance that couples with quality makes a huge difference in terms of the speed to integrate that data as well as the results that come out. So you really can't separate the models from the data. They have to work together for a particular purpose, which is the context of which those models are set. And if you don't set all that right, if you don't set the data, the models, and the outcomes, the desired outcomes, if you don't align them, you're going to end up with bad results. You're going to end up with false history. You're going to end up with hallucinations. And so starting at that data level, that layer of the cake, and understanding provenance and quality is critical.
That's great. And question to both of you now. I'm going to start off with Jack and then pass it off to Andy. What are the most effective ways to communicate the value and the risk of data quality to executive leadership or stakeholders who might not be deeply technical or work with the data itself?
Yeah, I think Andy just really said it. If you start with the business problem, I'll make, let's go with a popular example. If you're a sales leader and there's a promise of being able to make your sales team 20% more efficient. In other words, save 2 hours, out of a given week, let's say, per rep, just with these new tools. But if after trying that out, your reps come and say, hey, boss, I got some wacky results when I was using this tool that you guys have put in front of me, Copilot, whatever it is. I got some actually kind of misleading results. Didn't do what I thought it was going to do. To Andy's point, these models are only as good as the quality of the information that we're putting through. And so then you get to questions about, well, okay, is that team working on our own sandbox, that is in our internal data sets? Is it working on external, publicly available data sets? And obviously, the two should never mix. But when you then, if you train these models on your internal data sets purely, and those kinds of questions come up, to me, that is exactly the point where you say, let's go fix the assets. Then we can, then we can put those assets through models that really can be helpful.
Yeah, then I would say take those models or that output and and let's keep it at sort of the executive level. So I mean, when we're using this technology, it's germane to everybody. It's going to impact their workflow. But if we keep it up at the executive level, we have to map those outcomes to the KPIs. We need to map them to what are the business outcomes that we're looking for. And then we also have to understand the ROI in order to get there. So I think those factors, I think we're getting some discipline around that. But where we're getting less discipline is around the negative side. So what the risks are. And I think in that case, what we need to do is play scenarios, right? So we need to understand, where we're using this technology, what's the worst that can happen? Maybe it's the worst, the medium, and the best, the least amount of risk that we have. But understanding what that risk is and really asking the question, and it's clear we don't know. We're not doing that as a business community yet. I mean, just last month, a major consulting firm, was cited or was called out about using generative AI, and it hallucinated in a report. It's like how does that happen, right? It's that we're not playing those scenarios right now.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to dig a little bit deeper into frameworks and some sort of tangible things that companies and leaders can employ and start using. So Jack, question for you. How can companies tie data quality directly to business outcomes? And what indicators should they watch for to ensure any data investments are paying off?
Yeah, it comes back to what we've been doing for decades, which is really a data governance activity. And so the winning philosophy, the winning strategy on governance forever is to put that, what you just described, the quality, in the hands of a broad set of users who are closest to those data items. And so you end up with stewards and owners, and you clarify kind of the treaty lines between folks in terms of data quality. Then second, tying that data quality to some sort of metric, for simple terms, let's call it a bonus, some sort of metric, whether it's something that is of high interest to those data stewards, in a formal way, so that you have quality standards that are adhered to, and if you maintain those standards, you win. You get a higher bonus, you get promoted, whatever it is. And ultimately, the business outcome becomes the barometric pressure reading out on the front end. And if the business outcome is in jeopardy, right, then usually you neck back to, hey, we had a data quality issue. But if those two are in harmony, if you will, right, this takes us to a framework we love called the information economy. If the supply side is in balance with the demand side, then you have high performance. You have business outcomes. Those salespeople I mentioned earlier are getting verifiable, high quality results from the work they're doing. And that's because the core assets are of high quality. Now, we know it's a halfway to the wall type of effort. We know that data governance is never perfect. You can't just go in and fix it. So it is something that it's persistent over time. But there is nothing new here. I mean, I think I'm gonna, it's a common refrain. You could call it AI governance if you'd like today, but really what we're talking about is model governance, and we're talking about data governance. It's not that new.
Yeah, I love the information economy, Jack. I mean, for anybody, Jack did a very quick summary of it, but go to the IAA site and read more about it, because it is about supply and demand and making sure that you understand both sides of that that information economy within an organization, which feeds into, the Delta framework, in my opinion. You have to understand Delta: data, enterprise, leadership, targets, and analysts, right? Those, how mature are we across that spectrum? I, of course, focus on the D, or the data side, of the Delta framework. And we're very fortunate that at Oasis Open, that we are creating standards for provenance around data, so that across the board, across the organization, across vendors of data, that we can get to a standardization. How do we bring transparency to those aspects of data sets? And so that's another framework that I think is really critical for companies to look at, or organizations to look at, to know that they have the data quality and provenance to be able to achieve the outcomes that they're looking for.
And Andy, see what you're talking about then is guaranteeing the governance side, that is the high quality side. You're buying it, right? In other words, what you're pointing to is a world where I'm buying a fresh set that has been verified, that is, and it seems like the rise of that relative to the assets that we create, if you will, whether that's through exhaust or that's just a set of data assets that are crucial to running the enterprise today, that's where things can get really gummed up, if you will, right? There are so many folks that are handling. Often it's not clear who the owner, who has responsibility for that. But what you're describing is it is so, I think, refreshing to a data leader, because you're effectively buying cleanliness, you're buying provenance, as you said it. And often I think that's almost it's a better way than trying to clean up assets that you have on your own. So
yeah, thank you. That I think, working with both sides of the equation. So let's just call it buyers and sellers of an asset, and bringing that transparency, helping, the sellers, the providers of those data assets, understand what the buyers are looking for. It's been surprising to me over the past few years, with Blue Street Data, seeing that need, that gap in terms of what people are selling and what people want to buy. So I see that as a large part of our mission, is to clear all that up, so that there's a free flow of data with the highest quality, with the appropriate cost, with the deepest provenance.
yeah.
Yep. That's great. You both had a beautiful segue into a topic I want to dig a little bit deeper on, which is, we all know that data quality is crucial to analytic maturity. And Andy, I'm going to pose this to you first, and then over to you, Jack. How can leaders and teams validate data quality in a scalable way? I think this is building off of what you both just mentioned. And Andy, the Oasis Open Data Provenance Standards information, I'm going to send that in the chat if anyone's interested in exploring that a little bit more. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about how teams and companies can validate data quality in a scalable way.
Yeah, I think scalability. I had a conversation literally Monday with somebody who's a leader in, the advertising agency industry, and we were talking about cost and quality and provenance. And I said, "What's most important to you?" And he said, "Scalability." He's like, "I want all those three things, but if we can't scale it across the organization, it makes it very difficult for us to use that data." So in terms of scalability, I think that the providers need to understand that. So more and more people don't want to buy analytics dashboards. Larger organizations are building their own models, and they want to directly feed the granular data into their models to get the best results that relate to their use cases. And so we spend a lot of time talking about that with providers, is that you remember the largest organizations are going to want the granular data. So I think it starts there, and then you have to have a platform that can, ingest the metadata around those data sets to be able to evaluate cost, quality, provenance. And that's what we do at Blue Street Data, is that we create that platform that will take that metadata, and that will help providers understand where they are from provenance and quality perspective, but then also help the buyers understand how that provenance and quality and cost relates to the use cases they're trying to solve. So you need technology. You not only need to understand, the importance of those aspects, but you need technology to scale.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Any additions to that, Jack, on scalable data quality measurement?
No, Andy, I mean, I think, yeah, it just occurs to me how far ahead, in other words, this is future thinking to me. The idea of metadata on data, I know to us, it seems so standard, but the idea that you would have, uh, you would have a whole robust set of quality measurements, metadata on the data sets that you're buying for large enterprises, particularly. It just seems as though there is a standard set of folks that we get our data from. The idea that we just trust that because it's coming from, Way Big Co. or Way Big Co. 2, it's of high quality. And the world that says no, in fact, there is a set of metadata on those data sets that you can use to evaluate that. That's actually a relatively new concept, it seems to me. Again, particularly for large enterprises who are buying in bulk and who, for whom it is the sort of the engine fuel to keep things going. They don't have a lot of time to wait on that, and that just it's part of production, and so they're using it today without really checking on it, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. All right, I have one more question before I transfer it over to some audience questions. And that is more on sort of the team and leadership structure side of things. So for both of you, and Jack, I'm going to pose this to you first and then over to Andy. What is your vision for the future of the Chief Data Officer or Chief Data and Analytics Officer? How do you think that role has already changed, will change in the future? And do you have any recommendations for how a Chief Data Officer can best position themselves as a strategic partner to other leadership like a CEO?
Yeah, I think I have a two-part answer there, Kate, and I'll come back to the very beginning. Yesterday, an old client of ours took a new chief data analytics and AI title at a large enterprise. Press release came out, and to us, we have seen other press releases that say we're bringing a chief AI officer in, and we're kind of dropping the data and analytics piece. To us, organizationally, that it's alphabet soup here, but the D, the A, and the AI are all part of one thing, right? They're all part together here, and so and they should be incorporated as opposed to separate. So I think that's my first answer. My second answer is be patient, because I believe that the age of data will come back. In other words, it is starting to come back. We're starting to be in the later innings, the third inning of a 9-inning game here, but we're in the later stages of the first part of this movement, where there is now a reconciliation, and there is, hey, boy, we're spending a lot of money in this area. What's the return? Oh, it's the data side. So patience, I think, is the name of the game here if you're a data leader.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I would also, there's this aspect, and I know I've talked a lot about risk today, but risk is an important part of managing a business. And I think that the people that are in the alphabet soup role, as Jack described, need to both be able to tell stories about the value of implementing this technology, how it impacts revenue, KPIs. But I think that they need to understand that there's a trade-off between performance and principles. And what I mean by that is that if you're building models with data and you're using them in critical parts of the organization, are you focused on performance? The better the models, the better the results. Well, if you can't be transparent about what's created by those models and why the models are making that decision, you introduce a significant amount of risk into the equation. And I think that knowledge needs to be transferred to the C-suite. People need to understand it. And, so responsible use of that data science, which is one of my roles at the University of Pittsburgh, where I chair the advisory board for responsible data science, that's a huge part of our focus. is understanding that trade-off between principle and performance.
Yep, that is great. All right, I have one audience question. First one is for Jack. And this is, the golden question. So I'll be interested to see what your answer to this very difficult question is. But how should organizations balance the need for speed with the need for data accuracy and reliability? What does that trade-off look like? Do you at the IA have any frameworks you guys use and tell companies to adopt for that?
Yeah, there's a great book, and of course I've forgotten the author, but go slow to go fast. And I think there is an element here of it takes some time to get the data house in order. So in order to, so there are two frameworks: go slow to go fast, and then agile. So the business users are hungry, and they were hungry for data, for insights before the AI trend started, and now they're even hungrier because they're just reading and they're saying so. Ultimately, I think the necking down the issue, the problem. So segmenting a particularly high benefit business case and saying, let's just never solve again halfway to the wall, but let's clean up, let's clarify, let's get this particular asset well governed so that we can show some success to the business unit, and then repeat and repeat and repeat. But Kate, I've been saying this for a decade. So again, I'm coming back to these tactics. This advice is not new. And so the enterprises, Tom Davenport used to say when we started the business, don't try to boil the ocean. In other words, you're not going to solve your data issue and then start doing analytics. It's solve a little, deliver insights, solve some more, deliver insights. So I think my advice is still the same as it's been, since we started IIA.
That's great. Yeah. I have one more question for you, Jack, from the audience. How often should organizations revisit their maturity assessments and investment roadmaps in data to reflect evolving goals over time? How often do you recommend, and that might be dependent on many things, but how often do you at the IA recommend people revisit that strategy?
Yeah, well, and so my recommendation is actually based on real data. So in other words, again, having assessed multiple organizations, many organizations over the past call it 9 years now, the standard seems to be annually. But really, what you're doing is, if your pace of change is high, we have seen enterprises do what I'll call pulse checks in terms of their maturity every 6 months, as a way to show both the capability improvement, back to my information economy, the supply side improving, data is getting higher quality. In other words, data is getting cleaned up, pipelines are getting freed up, organizations are starting to work together in terms of data assets. And the demand side is starting to say, wow, if I'm again a sales, you told, the machine told me who to call next, and I called that person and they were ready to buy our product. Imagine, okay, so it's working, right? So really simple examples here. But I would say no more than 18 to 24 months. I mean, certainly there are some enterprises who are going slowly and they say, gosh, we shouldn't measure anything under 2 years. To us, at the minimum 12 months, right? And then a pulse kind of just to show leadership, hey, we're moving here. We're moving here. Here's a little, we're giving you a quick check every 6 months to show progress.
The only thing I would add on to that, Tech, is I like faster than a year, because things are changing so quickly. So what do you have? I mean, are you building the right skill sets? Do you have the right technology? Do you have the right people? So I would advocate, looking at your maturity, even, every 6 months. It's hard to look out further than that.
Yeah.
All right, we are right at the end of our time today. So thank you both again for your time and your expertise. Thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to share one last resource in the chat. That's our Blue Street Data Buyer's Guide that I believe Andy mentioned, the 12-step process for data buying that we edited and authored last year. And then I would encourage you to visit the IA website as well to learn more about the frameworks that Jack mentioned. They're great, and they have a plethora of great resources in their library there. Thank you again, Andy and Jack, for joining today. And thank you everyone for logging on, and speak with you both soon.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Jack.